Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. World leaders have been converging on London, England for tomorrow's funeral of Queen Elizabeth II, who died on September the 8th at Balmoral in Scotland. A lot has happened between then and the present, including the ascension to the throne and the proclamation of her son Charles as the next British monarch and head of the Commonwealth of Nations. In the meantime, thousands of mourners from around the world are still queuing up to have a last glimpse of the Queen's body, which has since last Wednesday been lying in state at Westminster Hall, preparatory to tomorrow's committal to Mother Earth. Well, joining us now to kickstart our coverage of that event is Arise special correspondent Judita Dasilva, who is at Hyde Park, where the funeral procession will pass through. Good morning, Judita.
Good morning, Oji. How are you?
Doing very well. And, I've seen the queues have been growing and, the mourners have been queuing up to, view the Queen's body as she lies in state at Westminster Hall. I believe last night, all 8 of the Queen's grandchildren stood silent vigil beside her coffin. How's the mood this morning?
Sorry, Oji, there's a lot of traffic around this area because, as you can imagine, it's quite fever-pitched in the lead up to the event tomorrow. But from what I heard from the question, yes, it has been. Since Wednesday, they have been doing the lying in state of the late Queen Elizabeth II. The queues it seems relentless because what the managers, because there's been a lot of volunteers from the Navy, from the Army, from the police who have been managing those queues. They said that every time they think it's dying down, that they've had to close the queue and then reopen it. There's surges of people because there's been such an outpouring from people who have flown in from around the world to say their final farewell to the late monarch. And as of yesterday, there's a section towards the end where you get to Westminster Hall, where the Queen is lying in state, called the Snake. Everyone feels when they get to the Snake that they're finally close, but the Snake itself is a 4-hour wait. As of last night, the entire queue was about 13 hours. But as you've seen over the past days, there have been celebrities like David Beckham who started his queue at 2 a.m. on Friday and waited 12 hours to say his final farewell. But that is just the reverence with which the people of Britain and around the world hold the late Queen. And they're willing to do that because they feel by making that sacrifice, they're showing the respect that they truly had and the esteem they had for her. So it's quite a remarkable thing to witness.
Absolutely, Judita. Could you just speak to the orderliness of the entire process? Of course, many people have flown in from across the world to pay their respects. But what should we look out for in terms of what could happen tomorrow in terms of orderliness? So far, it's been quite impressive.
It's a military operation. That is the best way to describe it, because what will happen is that as of 6:30 a.m. tomorrow morning, the last members of the public will be admitted to say their farewell to the Queen, who's lying in state at Westminster Hall. Then her body will be carried by which is now currently draped in the royal standard with the instruments of state, that is the imperial state crown, the orb and the scepter. That will then be carried by the state on a state gun carriage over to where they're going to have I believe it will start at 10:55. They're taking her over to Westminster Abbey, where the funeral will take place. It'll be conducted by the late Very Reverend David Hoyle, who is the Dean of Westminster, and then the sermon itself will be given by the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. Then at 10:55, there'll be the final post, and then the playing of the national anthem by the Queen's Piper. Then her body will be carried to the Wellington Arch, which I'm standing quite close to here in Hyde Park Corner because we're just a stone's throw from Buckingham Palace. So we're actually in the heart of where the event will take place, and this will be filled with a surge of people. To think they're planning for 2,000 guests and hundreds of heads of state. They've invited heads of state from every country in the world apart from 6, and that is Belarus, Russia, Myanmar, Venezuela, Syria, and Afghanistan for political reasons we already know. So you can just imagine that when it comes to military operation, the security logistics of tomorrow are going to be tremendous because as of today, all the heads of state who are attending will be making their way to Britain and then following security protocol and control.
All right, Judita, talk to us a bit more about the symbolism, if you like, of what will happen tomorrow morning. I know that it's not going to be a very lengthy affair, just about, an hour. 2,000 guests, but then symbolically a 2-minute national silence. Talk to us about that. I mean, most people are used to a minute silence, but then we will have 2 minutes of national silence for the Queen tomorrow. How important is that?
That is probably going to be the most poignant moment, because that is a moment they're using to unify the entire country, because we can only watch the funeral, all the people can only watch, they can't attend. But they have to have a moment where they feel everyone comes together for the Queen. We've seen similar things happen during the lying in state, when they had the 5-minute silence, which was held by the new King Charles III and his siblings, which was the Duke of York, the Earl of Wessex, and the Princess Royal. And then they had the 8 grandchildren of the Queen, and that was then a 15-minute silence with Prince William, Harry, and all of their cousins. So what's happening is that 2-minute silence, it's kind of similar to what we have on Remembrance Day on the 11th of November, when we pay remembrance to the end of the war, and you have that 1-minute silence at 11 a.m. This is a 2-minute silence because of the significance of what is happening. And what you find is when we do have Remembrance Day 1 minute, the whole country seems to stand still. And it makes you feel, it makes you think, it makes you pensive. So to have the same thing happen for 2 minutes, that's the moment where the world comes together and says a final goodbye. So that's going to be truly powerful, and that's the significance it holds. It's a unifying significance, it's a farewell, and it's a moment that we will hold in our hearts forever, because we know that after then, the end has truly come.
Right, the end has truly come, and then a new era has begun. I'd like your thoughts on King Charles III. Yesterday, he took his eldest son, Prince William, and honored mourners who had been standing in long queues for their patience. What does this gesture signal to you, Judita?
To me, what I think it is, to put it cynically as a journalist, it's politics. It's optics, because what people have found is part of the emotion that, as we've seen play out with the loss of Queen Elizabeth II, is she marks the end of an era. She was a different breed because she came from a different time. She was a child, she was a monarch that was brought to fruition at the end of the war. She has kept a tether to the way things used to be, and what many say the way things ought to be. People don't have an intrinsic and a guttural warmth towards King Charles III, but what he has to learn how to do is find a way to become the people's king, because we're in a country that has a constitutional monarchy, because you have a constitutionally elected government and a figurehead in the de facto head, that is the monarch. You don't have governmental power, but you need to have people power. That is what will sustain the monarchy. King Charles has to navigate arguably the hardest transition in the world, because people say at the time we live in now, it's a time people don't recognize. There is so much change, and the proliferation of change is something that many older generations fight hard to navigate. You need somebody that reminds you that things are still the way they used to be, but in an adaptive environment. Charles has to occupy that space. People don't find him personable. He needs to learn how to be. So going out with Prince William, because that's the king and the king to be, you're giving people a chance to touch you, to know you, to mourn with you, to be human. And that will help him in improving the emotion that people have towards him, because if you don't have the hearts of the people, you will struggle. And remember, King Charles III has to battle with the shadow of, this was a time everyone had dreamt of being Queen Diana's reign, and she isn't here.
I love the direction you've come with in terms of the guttural warmth and intrinsic draw towards him. Do you believe that over time King Charles III could occupy the space that you describe?
Time will tell. I hope he doesn't, because even when we've seen him when he was signing the official state documents, where it went viral, this video of him having a tantrum because his pen leaked, they've had things like he's known as the spoiled prince. He's got to learn how to not make mistakes like that, because he's come after a mother who never put a foot wrong. And even when she did have a hiccup, like when she took too long to speak about Diana's death, they realized it was because she was staying with her grandchildren, and she did what needed to be done. Charles needs to learn how to make do and mend quickly. In time, he could do it, because remember, time heals all wounds. Camilla, who's now the queen consort, the country has warmed to her somewhat. They thawed in the icy approach they had to her because it took time. But time must also come with consistency. King Charles must be a consistent monarch, a reliable monarch, a dependable monarch, and British people like that, because with change all around you, if someone stays true and stays steady, you know you can rely and depend on them, and that creates love and that creates warmth. So time will tell, but he must be dedicated to stay the course.
All right, Judita, what will security look like tomorrow, given the fact that many of the most powerful people in the world will be in London tomorrow? What sort of, will it be a militarized affair? What sort of security should the world expect tomorrow?
It's going to be possibly the tightest security we've ever seen in this country, because this is the first state funeral since Winston Churchill. And this is an even bigger affair because, like they said, leaders of every country in the world except for those 6 have been invited. When you think about the actual logistics, the Metropolitan Police have said this is the hardest job they've ever had to do, because they have the most important people in the world all congregated in the same area. We have had reports that they're going to be bussed into the funeral venue in groups. That way they can control the security of them in batches, as opposed to everybody having their individual security detail and navigating logistics between them. But we know there might be some exceptions. For instance, President Joe Biden and Jill Biden will be coming in the Beast, that we know is the car of the President of the United States of America. So we're going to be learning over the course of today, particularly the logistics they have. But as far as security, most of this area that we're going to be in will be locked down and locked down tight, because they cannot afford to have any blind spots, any vantage points for people. Even the roof of the location we're reporting from has been taken over by the Metropolitan Police. So even today, you're getting the sensation that tomorrow is going to be a day unlike any other, but it's going to be a day that no one will ever forget, because tomorrow we are all going to be participating in the making of history.
Well, all right, Judita. We'll hear more from you during the course of the day. Thank you so much for joining us on the morning show this morning. Well, it's time now for a short break on the morning show. When we return, we'll review top stories in today's newspapers. Do stay with us.